David, the big talking point in the Irish League now is, are we going to see a change to seasonality? It feels like something we've been debating for about 20 years, ever since the League of Ireland made the switch to a summer season back in the early 2000s. But it looks like the Irish League clubs are going to sit down, they're going to at the very least have a conversation about it. A model that's been mentioned is switching the tweak rather than a full change, maybe moving to something like May to February. But let's take it back to the very beginning for everyone. We've played the August-May format, the traditional British format, if you want to call it that. We've played that for 125 plus years. What's the problem with it? Why on earth would we change something that's worked for over a century?
As folk will know, Keith, I'm very much a traditionalist, and I'm not adverse to change, but I need to be very clear that change is going to benefit all who are involved in football. I'm one of those who I probably want my cake and eat it. I struggle now with the fact that we're not playing competitively when our teams are playing in Europe. And having watched, since I've stepped away from Ballymena United, I've taken in European games of all of the teams who've been competing in Europe. And what is very clear in terms of my assessment of it is that teams would have and could have done better if they'd been playing competitively. You can do as much pre-season as you want. You can have as many practice games as you want. You can have all of the figures and all of the tests and all of whatever else you need to see that someone's up to speed. But unless you're playing competitively, unless you've got that emotional edge, that mental edge, I think we're at a loss. And I can give you numerous examples of situations where players, whether it was from Cliftonville or from Linfield or from Larne, where if they had been, if some of their players, as I said, if I felt had been right up to speed, then results would have been different. So I would love to see us playing competitively in and around Europe. That's one bit that I would want. Boxing Day was an undoubted success. You look at the numbers right across the board. That is the day when traditionally families will come out. Those who don't go to games regularly will make the effort on that particular day. I don't know why that's the case, but it just is a lovely family, wholesome tradition that we have. So I very much want to protect Boxing Day.
And of course, we would lose that if we move to the League of Ireland model, which is February to November.
And that's why I wouldn't be in favour of that. The other point that I wanted to throw in is, yet again, we had the weather disrupted, as it was the Irish Cup, when we had supposed to have 16 ties to be played. We ended up with 8 ties being played. One of them only went ahead, the Cumberrec Ballymacash game, because it was a change of venue. And there's something around, would it be wise, would it be sensible, to play to Boxing Day, to the New Year game, and then to take a break, to give everyone a chance just to take a deep breath. We're coming after Christmas, when lots of money has been spent by families. There's maybe not as much money around, where weather isn't great. There's a number of reasons, and I suppose for me, Keith, I'm looking for a time where we are competitive in Europe, where we protect Boxing Day and possibly New Year's, but we also, give players a chance and give them a break. Now, I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work out. I am not in favour of going full blast and just mirroring what goes on with our brethren in the League of Ireland. Don't want to go there. Because some of the losses would be too great. But those are the areas which I would like to see protected, and can we work our way towards that?
Well, the tweak that has been talked about, as I understand it, is that we would start the season, let's say in May, usually when the Irish Cup final is, around about that area. Then we play through June and July, and then the season will end in February, a couple of months early. How would you feel about that as a proposal? That seems to fit in with most of the things that you're talking about.
That does fit, and I think the fact that we talked about Boxing Day and the festive period being absolutely massive for the local game in terms of the turnout of supporters, you would be really coming to a crescendo. If you're finishing it off in February, the title race should be really hot and heavy in and around that Christmas and festive period. So if that was to be the case, if that was to be the tweak, then I would support it 100%.
Some issues have been raised. One of them would be players have raised an issue. Some players have raised an issue that they feel they wouldn't really get a proper break because they would be working over the summer holidays and then again the Christmas holidays. So they're, with traditional season, you get a summer break. With the League of Ireland season, you get the Christmas break. With this format, they would get neither. As a former player, do you see that as an issue?
Um, if this again, where I'm going to sound so contrary, because ultimately it's all about players, and we have a duty of care to our players and their health and their well-being, and they do need a time out. But listen, it's not the only profession, Keith, where demands are being made. And let me remind folk, we're on this road to a lot of teams being full time. If what I'm being told is true in terms of the remuneration, well, if you're paid the money, then that's part of the sacrifice you've got to look at. It's a short career. We're not asking you to do this or work this particular pattern for the rest of your life. That will come to an end. So while I have a sympathy and an understanding, if players are demanding what they're demanding, if they have the expectations that they have, then there's got to be a little bit of give and take. And we're not just talking about the full-time players here. We're talking about the part-time players here who, as I say, some of the wages I'm being told are being paid are pretty eye-catching. So if you want, this is about choice as well. No one's forcing you to go and play. If you want, and that might be sounding a little bit controversial and a little bit harsh, but when I think about the money that's being earned and being asked for, then if the tweak would allow football in itself, I feel, to progress, then that's a price that needs to be worked in.
Another issue, of course, and we've mentioned it, we've talked a little bit about the fact the 8 games were called off on Saturday past. If you're finishing the season in January and February, there's a higher chance of games being called off in the run-in, and that obviously is a logistical problem in terms of rearranging games. Do you think that's an issue? It's not impossible. You could have the weather that we saw just past this weekend could happen on the final weekend of the season, and you could have all sorts of problems.
Listen, we could try and forecast the weather all day long, and I tell you what, 6 days a week and twice on a Sunday, we'll never get it consistently right. I know I sound a little bit contrary around some of the stuff we've talked about, and hopefully I am making sense. But part of me thinks, could we even go for a short break, and still look at end maybe in March, so we're given, and that would be my thought process. I would still say if we could maybe have some sort of a break, let's try it. Let's see. We'll never be able to predict. It could well be that we could have even a short break, even a 2-week sort of downing tools, or 3 weeks downing tools, and the weather could be perfect during that time. And then on the resumption of the league, then we could find ourselves in all sorts of difficulties. So. Those are things to be kicked about. I think if we don't try and do something, if we just stay where we're at, then we are most definitely, we're going to become stagnant with regards to Europe, and that's primarily where I see us having to progress, because it just doesn't benefit the clubs who are playing in Europe. It actually benefits the league from the solidarity monies that come through. So the sooner we can see this as a collective, as how can we be better? How can we be better prepared? How can we give ourselves a better chance in progressing? Then we've got to look at change, and if we could get, as I say, Boxing Day, New Year's Day, if we could try and get that little bit of a break, be competitive when it comes to Europe, if someone could come up with a solution, then I would be delighted.
It does feel like we're moving in a direction towards this tweak, but there's like little things that need to be thought through and sorted out, doesn't there? I mean, first off, we really need to bring the championship with us. We need to maintain promotion, relegation. That needs to be essential.
Keith, I would be very clear that we've got to bring up literally the whole body with us.
Yeah.
Because we talk passionately in here about the footballing family, and it's not just about the Premiership, it is about the Championship, it is about the IPL. There's going to be changes coming shortly, as we have discussed before, in terms of the IPL and grassroots football. So all of that is extraordinarily important. I'm not saying we do it all in one fell swoop, but unless we're bringing our whole family, our whole footballing family with us, then it will not work. Because if it's only for the few, if it's only just for the Premiership, then it will fall flat on its face. So unless we can get some consensus across the board where it meets everybody's needs, then if we couldn't get that consensus, and this is going to be, I'm going to sound so contrary now, then leave it the way it is.
Well, there are sort of other issues there when you start talking about the transfer window and when does that go to. The Irish Cup, we just had the Irish Cup 5th round, or at least we got half of the Irish Cup 5th round at the weekend. That becomes quite tricky. You couldn't start that in January and finish in February. Obviously, that needs to start in maybe October, and that needs then, because you've got the preliminary rounds, you need the intermediate teams to fall in behind.
Well, that's the basis in the sense of my argument. Unless we bring everybody with us, the one little point I maybe want to pick up on is about the transfer window. I've long talked about my dislike of the winter transfer window. This is an ideal opportunity to have one window, and let it be done, and that's your squad for the season, and crack on. Because it really is a nightmare. Maybe not for those clubs who have got the financial muscle, but for those clubs who have brought players in who have developed, who they become a big part of how a club is going in any particular season. I think this would be a great time to have just one window, and I would be quite happy with that.
David, we've talked about this before. I don't know about you, but I get the sense we'll talk about this again at some point.
Keith, we have talked about it on many occasions, and I think we will be continuing to talk about it, but hopefully for not too much